Well, hi, welcome. I'm Sheldon McLeod. This is Thinking Out Loud, presented to you by SaltWire. And, if you're lucky enough to have your health, you have no worries in life. But we're at a place where trying to figure this all out is a little bit overwhelming in some ways. We know that there has been this idea that we were going to have some kind of public pharmacare at some point in this country. And this is something that our next guest has spent a great deal of his life discussing and looking into. In fact, Bill Swan and Avi Lewis will be in Halifax later today to talk about this. And Bill Swan used to be involved with a group called the Faces of Pharmacare. I'm not sure how he describes himself outside of being a patient advocate. Bill, it's good to see you again.
You've called me a disturber before, so yeah. How are you?
I'm well.
Wow.
This tour, and you've been traveling around the Maritimes talking to people, I assume, about what challenges, concerns. What is it exactly you're trying to get to the bottom of here?
Right. Well, my project, Faces of Pharmacare, never really went away. It just suffered like everything else did during the pandemic, and there was no room to talk about these sorts of things. And then earlier this year, I got approached by the Council of Canadians. They'd found my website and said, hey, there's a lot of good stuff there. What could we do? We had a good discussion about what I think has been missing a long time, and that's the patient voice. So I went to Ottawa in, I think, February, did a press conference there. Then we did an online piece with Avi. And the whole idea was to start to do town halls to really bring this issue to bear in areas where perhaps the Liberals might be a little weak, and they need to think about how they're going to get reelected. So this idea is to say, look, you promised to do pharmacare, over and over and over again. You now have an agreement with the NDP to do pharmacare. Nothing seems to be happening. Now, lots of other things in the agreement with the NDP have moved forward. But the pharmacare piece, I think, legitimately is a little tougher a nut to crack. There is nothing like the lobby that we see in pharmacare in, for example, dental care. You don't see that huge pushback. So this is about kind of bringing the voices back, reminding people that people suffer from these issues every single day. And we are in our drug system just like America. If you're poor, if you have a good job, or you're elderly, you're covered. Otherwise, you're out of luck. And there's a lot of people that fit into that group.
And things have changed. I don't know, Bill, that I've mentioned in the past that I have coverage, but my coverage has changed. Things are being moved. The copay is going up. And, I'm grateful to have some coverage, but it's slowly being eroded, and I don't think for the fact of getting ready for a national plan. I don't think that's why it's changing.
No, it's not changing for that reason. And let's be clear. A lot of finger pointing goes toward the pharmaceutical company, but one of the bigger problems we have in this country is private or even not-for-profit insurance, who does exactly what you just said. They find any way to say no. They find any way to cut it back, to cut it down, and honestly, Sheldon, if you suddenly had to take one of the newer drugs, a biologic, good luck with that. I mean, if you're at 25%, you're talking $1,000 a month easily for a single injection. So it is eroding, as you said, and eroding quickly. And they're trying to figure out how to keep things under control. Now, the problem is with the insurance industry is that they had a breath. When the pandemic came along, they were on their heels before the health committee in Ottawa. They were basically giving up. The pandemic gave them the time to recommit and really come forward with a bigger lobbying effort. And if I read the information correctly, the lobbying effort from insurance is actually a little bit bigger than pharmacare or from the pharmaceutical companies right now. So it's getting interestingly and woolly, but your story is exactly what's going on. This is exactly why we're having these town halls. I'll give you a good example or a bad example. We were supposed to have a conference call last week for the folks in Fredericton, and I'll be there on Wednesday. And one person couldn't meet up with us online. And it turned out that she'd gotten a notice from Fall Protection for her mother. Couldn't get an answer, had to drive from Fredericton to St. John to find out. Thankfully, her mother had not had a stroke, but had fainted and had some problems because she simply couldn't afford her blood pressure medication. And, I've got somebody in Faces of Pharmacare, same thing. She decided not to treat her high blood pressure and ended up with a stroke, just simply for $20 worth of medication a month. So these are the things we're trying to highlight to get people to understand, look, if you are healthy, that's great, but it doesn't take much to just go over that line a little bit and then start to run into these problems.
When we talk about political pressure, we talk about rallies and organizations that get together and say, here's what needs to be fixed or changed. And a government that says, oh, no, we've promised this, but where's the plan? What's the plan? And I think you quite rightly in that article I was showing pointed out there is no guarantee that we will have a pharmacare plan in place before potentially the next federal election.
Yeah. How
much longer can we wait?
I don't think we can wait much longer, but there isn't that political will. I think the lobbying efforts that came out from the pharmaceutical folks is quite difficult to deal with. I'll just point you at the more recent stuff about the Patent and Pricing Medicines Review Board, which we were going to have some of the best cost control mechanisms in the world, frankly, for pharmaceuticals. And the pushback was immense from pharmaceutical companies. They brought to bear people from rare disease groups, basically patient groups that have been co-opted because they're funded by pharmaceutical companies. So I think we're going to see that same pressure come to bear on pharmacare because, well, frankly, I mean, I've estimated we probably save somewhere between $15 and $25 billion every single year. Well, if we save the money, it's not going to someone else. And that means the pharmaceutical companies want to keep that money in their pocket. Frankly, I'd rather it be in the taxpayer's pocket rather than somebody's boat or second home.
There's also this concern about access to primary health care. Mm-hmm. And I have to ask if there's more of a role for it's hard to get a pharmacist to try and advocate for more pharmacare, or does that make sense?
Yeah, I think if you're talking pharmacy companies, it's a different thing. Every pharmacist I've spoken to feels the need for better access. And frankly, I'm one of those advocating for the idea that I should be able to manage my asthma with my pharmacist. I have to go to my doctor and explain a new drug to her. Well, that's kind of a waste of time. I'm not going out on a limb and taking something weird. I'm taking basically a newer version of the same drug I've taken for 55 years. So why waste an appointment with a doctor to do that when I can go to the pharmacist? If something comes up, yeah, absolutely, refer me back to the doctor.
So where are you this evening, and what's going to happen?
Right, this evening we're at SMU at the Scotiabank Theatre, going back to my alma mater. And that is at 7:00 tonight. Tickets are free. You can sign up if you want, or just show up and ask questions, find out what's going on. Tomorrow night I'll be in Charlottetown, and the next night in Fredericton. And then in May, I'm also going to Sydney and Antigonish.
What is the plan from Bill's perspective? What would work for Canadians and save us billions of dollars and help us be as healthy as possible with the drug coverage or the drugs that are available for us?
Look, I wrote a piece at the beginning of the pandemic, basically saying, hey, this is a perfect opportunity to kind of make this change. We're listening to the infighting between the provinces and the feds. And if the federal government would simply just take control, take over paying for medication, not delivering, just paying, that would actually free up a lot of money for the provinces to deal with the issues that they have. And frankly, the federal government is kind of silly not to do this because the savings would accrue to them rather than the provinces. It is frustrating to look at this same solution that's been suggested, frankly, since Tommy Douglas, and nothing moves. But the problem is it's so much misinformation about what's really going on out there that we have to fight.
And this coverage for dental care, you feel that's complicated things?
No, I don't think it's complicated. Look, we should have dental care. I mean, it's one of the best ways of improving primary health. I just think it was a distraction from what's going on. I like it. The fact of the matter is, I think they can now look at the agreement and say it was largely successful. But for me, the fact that Pharmacare just never really got out of the gate, that's been frustrating.
And the plan that's on the table federally is one that, if I'm not mistaken, doesn't really change a lot of things for a lot of people.
No, what I'm seeing is basically a lot of table setting rather than providing a meal. So, tell me when it's time to sit down and actually get to eating.
And Bill's story is one, as you alluded to, you had tried to self-manage your medication and it didn't go so well?
That's right. I mean, I grew up never realizing that we didn't have a full healthcare system. My dad was in the Navy, so he had coverage. When I finished my first degree at SMU, I went downtown to buy myself some health insurance, because that made sense. They asked me if I had a pre-existing condition. I said, well, yes, I have asthma. And they said, we won't cover you. Well, they wouldn't cover me for what I needed. They would cover everything else, but not for the asthma meds. And frankly, I was so confused. I went home and said, I must have asked that wrong because that doesn't make any sense. And that went down the next day. They told me the same thing. And I looked around and I said, well, that just doesn't seem right. And in my post-adolescent brain, I said, I'm just going to stop taking my drugs. But 2 weeks later, I ended up in the ER. And over that summer, I was in the ER about 4 times. And by the end of that, I'd realized there's a thesis. Went back to school, so I'd have coverage. And I've been beating this drum ever since.
Bill Swan, Faces of Pharmacare still exists online. People can find out more there?
Yes, they can. It's still there. We're looking at a revamp soon.
All right. Bill, thank you very much for this and for sharing with us. And we hope that we can move the needle on this important conversation so that I keep hearing we don't want people to be buying their healthcare with a credit card. No. But that's reality for a lot of people. They have to make some very serious choices based on what money they don't have to cover the drugs that they do need.
That's right. Thanks, Sheldon.
Right. Thank you.